Welcome back to my channel. Today, we will be talking about if a police officer says, "I know you're hiding something." All right, be honest with me, I know you're hiding something. You're standing there. Maybe it's a traffic stop. Maybe you're walking home. The officer leans in, voice calm but firm. I've been doing this a long time. People don't act like this unless they've got something to hide. Now your heart starts racing. Do you defend yourself? Do you explain? Do you stay silent? What do you do right now? Because in this moment, one sentence from you can completely change what happens next. And yes, this situation is extremely common. Officers are trained to say things like this, not because they already have proof, but because they're trying to get it from you. So in this video, I'm going to break down exactly what that statement means, what the officer is trying to do, what mistakes people make in this moment, and most importantly, the exact words you should say immediately to protect yourself. Because this is one of those situations where talking feels natural, but silence is often your strongest legal protection. Let's break it down. Before we go anywhere further, comment where in the world you're watching from and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. When an officer says, "I know you're hiding something," that is not evidence. It's a tactic. It's designed to make you feel like they already know more than they actually do. And here's the key truth. They don't need proof to say it. They're allowed to use psychological pressure during encounters. So when you hear that line, what they are really doing is fishing. They're hoping you'll fill the silence. They're hoping you'll explain. They're hoping you'll slip. And most people do. They start talking. They start justifying. They start volunteering information they were never asked to give. That's mistake number one, talking too much. Because once you start talking, you lose control of the situation. You might say something inconsistent. You might guess instead of knowing. You might accidentally admit to something small that leads to something bigger. And here's the part most people don't realize. Even innocent explanations can create suspicion if they don't sound perfect. So what should you do instead? You respond calmly, clearly, and briefly. I choose to remain silent. That's it. No attitude, no sarcasm, no extra words. I choose to remain silent. Why does this work? Because it invokes your right to silence in a clear, unmistakable way. You're not arguing. You're not resisting. You're simply declining to answer questions. And that forces the officer to rely on actual evidence, not your words. Now let's go deeper, because silence alone is not always enough. Sometimes the officer will push harder. They might say, "If you've got nothing to hide, why not just tell me what's going on?" This is another trap. It sounds reasonable, it feels logical, but it flips the burden onto you. You are not required to prove innocence on the roadside. The law does not require you to explain yourself just because an officer is suspicious. So your next move matters. You calmly say, "Am I being detained or am I free to go?" This question does two important things. First, it forces the officer to clarify your status. Second, it shifts the conversation away from vague suspicion and into legal territory. If you are free to go, you leave. If you are being detained, the officer must justify that detention based on reasonable suspicion, not just a feeling. And here's the key. You're not challenging the officer. You're asking a lawful question. Tone matters. Stay calm, stay steady, because the moment you become aggressive, the situation can escalate quickly. Now let's talk about another common mistake, trying to clear things up. This is where people say things like, "I'm not hiding anything, I was just," and then they start talking. This feels harmless, but it's exactly what the officer is waiting for. Because once you start talking, the officer can ask follow-up questions. They can probe, they can test your answers. And the more you talk, the more chances there are for inconsistencies. So instead of explaining, you keep your response consistent. I choose to remain silent. If the officer continues questioning, you repeat it. Not louder, not more emotional, just consistent. Now let's add another layer. Sometimes after saying, "I know you're hiding something," the officer will try to escalate into a search. They might say, "Mind if I take a quick look? If there's nothing there, you've got nothing to worry about." This is where people make one of the biggest mistakes, giving consent. Because once you say yes, you've just given away a major protection. You've allowed a search that might not have been legal otherwise. So what do you say? "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." That sentence is critical. It's calm, it's clear, and it protects your rights. Notice what it does. It doesn't accuse the officer. It doesn't resist physically. It simply withholds permission. And that matters because if a search happens anyway, your lack of consent can become important later. Now let's address something important. Not consenting doesn't mean physically stopping the officer. Never block, push, or interfere. If the officer proceeds, you let them, but you've made your position clear. Now let's talk about tone and behavior, because what you say matters, but how you say it matters just as much. If you respond with anger, sarcasm, or hostility, you increase the risk of escalation. Officers are trained to respond to perceived threats. So even if you're legally correct, your behavior can change the outcome. Keep your hands visible. Avoid sudden movements. Speak calmly. Short sentences. No arguing on the roadside. This is not the place to win the case. This is the place to protect your rights. Now here's another key moment. If the questioning continues and you feel pressure building, you can take it one step further. "I want to speak to a lawyer." This is powerful because once you clearly request a lawyer, questioning should stop in many situations. But you must be clear. Not "maybe I should get a lawyer," not "do I need a lawyer?" You say, "I want to speak to a lawyer." Direct, unambiguous. Now let's talk about what not to do. Do not try to outsmart the officer. Do not lie. Lying can create separate legal problems. Do not guess answers. Do not fill silence with nervous talking. And most importantly, do not try to win the interaction emotionally. Your goal is not to convince the officer in that moment. Your goal is to avoid making things worse. Because many cases are based on what people say during these exact interactions. Now, let's bring it all together. When an officer says, "I know you're hiding something," it is not a conclusion. It's a strategy. They're testing you. They're applying pressure. They're waiting for you to respond in a way that gives them more information. And your response determines everything that follows. So here is the safest framework to remember. Stay calm. Keep your movement slow and visible. Do not argue. Do not explain. Say, "I choose to remain silent." Then ask, "Am I being detained or am I free to go?" If a search is requested, "I do not consent to any searches." And if questioning continues, "I want to speak to a lawyer." That's it. Simple, controlled, effective. And remember, laws can vary depending on your location and the specific situation. This is general educational information, not personal legal advice. But understanding these principles can make a critical difference in how an encounter unfolds. Because in these moments, silence is not weakness, it's strategy. And in the next video, we're going to break down what to do when an officer says, "Step out of the vehicle," and whether you actually have a choice.